Hello, everyone, and should we maybe wait for folks to settle in? Okay, I think we should start,
Yeah, we should.
Pulkit. Yeah, we have, all right, yeah. All right, before we get into the conversation, maybe a couple of lines about me. I am the editor of Storyboard 18, which is the premier destination for anything to do with the world of business and brands on CNBC TV 18 and the Network 18 platform as well. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we do. Maybe Pulkit, just a quick introduction.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining in. Rather good afternoon. Sorry about that. I have been at Snap for 15 months, and it's been a very different, unique, and incredible journey, I can tell you. I've spent a large part of my life in the tech industry, but this particular experience in specific has been really unique and eye-opening, and we'll talk more about it as I share my stories. One thing that probably worth mentioning is the sheer energy that's there in India. You go to any of these industry events, the sheer energy is really infectious. And it says a lot about where India is, and it's great. It's a great time to be in India as far as the consumer internet or the technology business is concerned.
Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more. And we had a phone ringing as well. So, given that the topic today is Gen Z, Pulkit, let me first just maybe a show of hands. How many would identify as Gen Z in the audience right now? Oh wow, okay, not bad, not bad. So
Are you on Snapchat?
Oh. How many of you use Snapchat? The few Gen Z in the room. Okay, so all Gen Zs in the room use Snapchat, Pulkit. That's great. All right, so millennials and Gen Zs in the room, and because you mentioned, Pulkit, that for you, it was, of course, a very eye-opening experience when you joined Snap. Think back to that moment for briefly and tell me what it was for you to experience the platform, the app. What were your initial thoughts? And what was that bang insight that hit you about the platform? Think back to that moment.
Well, just for context, before I joined Snap, I was leading the Google Pay India business team. And as you can imagine, payments is a very serious business. It's all about money. And you're dealing with people's money, and somebody was talking about the trust associated with the money. So I came from a very serious business where we were trying to fuel the economy by moving money faster. Here I am, fast forward. When I joined Snap, firstly, what dawned upon me when I heard that we have 250 million monthly active users, come to think of it, how many apps in India, of course, with due humility, will have 200 million plus people on their platform? I was aghast, like, is this the size and scale of Snap in India? And that was like the first amusing, awe-opening thing for me. And then when I got into my job, and I started having these sessions with some of our creators and users, I was taken aback on how people use the platform, what their disposition is, how they think about the world, about themselves and their friends around them. And to me, it has now become obsessive, which I need to correct. There is a behavioral change in me. I often, when I'm in restaurants or in malls or they're shopping around, I tend to look at youngsters a lot more than I ever did. And I find some very interesting behavior in terms of how they act, they behave, they talk, they use their phone. It's wildly different from how I used to be. And one thing last, I must confess that I downloaded the Snapchat app 2 weeks before the interview with Snapchat. And the first thing I did was to reach out to a family friend's daughter who's doing law. And it took her 10 minutes to explain what the app was. I was like a pro. in 10 minutes.
In 10 minutes, in 10 minutes. And while we continue our conversation, again, back to the Gen Zs in the audience, maybe take a moment to think about what a platform like Snapchat means for you. And I want to just ask you what you guys do on the platform. So think about it. We'll get a mic in the audience later and, you know, check in with a couple of y'all. But Pulkit, back to sort of Gen Z as a cohort. There's, of course, we tend to think of them as very elusive, as hard to understand. You have a front row seat to how they think, what they do on platforms. Tell me, while we constantly, of course, compare Gen Zers like we've compared every other generation to the predecessors. Give me your top 3 or 4, you know, points of differentiation here. How are they fundamentally different beyond, of course, the aspect that, you know, they are born and bred on technology versus us millennials, you know? So what makes them different apart from, of course, just the basic hygiene of having that technology?
When you come to think of it, I think, you know, the world in the last 100 years has seen massive shifts. And you start seeing how Gen X to the movement to millennials and now to Gen Z and then Alpha and then Beta and the nomenclature will go on. I think you come to think of it, the disposition of these generations has been very, very different. Gen X was predominantly the generation that consumed status because they were going through a post-World War II recovery. The world was changing. It was embracing technology. Gen Y was the generation that consumed experiences because they were the cusp of the world going through economic prosperity. Things were more accessible. I think Gen Z is what I say undefined identity in many ways, right? Because they are fearless. And if you were to sum up in one way what Gen Z is, I think Gen Z knows what they want and they know how to get it. And they are very confident, unlike the previous generations. So if you think about a few things, as I said, one, this generation is hyper-cognitive because they are born on technology. They are very comfortable with the amount of information, content being thrown at them. It makes me uncomfortable, but they are not. The second thing is, I think their behavior and consumption is not about ownership. It's about access to products and services. And access means that it's about access to OTT services, subscriptions of different products and services, cab ride, ride hailing. So they don't want to own anything. And what this means is that this access has a pronounced sense of what this consumption behavior means, right? And that it lends itself to many different ways in how brands should think about it, which we'll talk about. But that's the other point. It's not about ownership, it's about access to products and services. So products really are, they are a means to connect to consumers. They are not about selling something, some product once, but selling it multiple times to multiple users. And the third thing that I'll talk about is that this generation truly is about self-expression and authenticity. The fact that they are very visual in nature is very pronounced. And I'll give you a classic example. The other day, we were at a restaurant. There was somebody sitting next to us, and this youngster, what would you normally do when you are waiting for somebody at a restaurant? You'll probably call them or send them a question mark. They just took the picture I was observing, and probably they send the picture to somebody else. So their form of expression is very visual in nature. And we see that on our app too. 85% of our users actually end up using our lenses on a single day basis. There are 6 billion snaps globally in a single day that get clicked. It's actually more than any smartphone camera that's clicking photos for its users.
And before I get into, of course, specifically to their consumption habits and spending patterns, but do Indian Snapchatters behave differently from some of their global counterparts?
I wouldn't say differently. Firstly, about Snapchat, if you come to think of it, is about 3 things. It's about camera, it's about messaging, and it's about consuming content. So the fact that our platform opens to the camera, it puts the user front and center. It's about you, it's about your self-expression. So one of the similarities that we see between how it gets used here and elsewhere is the use of camera, the form of self-expression that a funny filter or a funny lens allows you to do. The differences, I would say, is that in India, our app is a pan-India phenomena, because unlike any other mature market, which is more uniform in nature, whether it's attitudes, behaviors, language, form of consumption, India is a very diverse market. There are so many different languages, there are so many different forms of content. So interestingly, our app is a pan-India phenomena. It's not restricted to just urban users. 2 out of 3 users come out of the top 8 cities in India.
And back to your point about authenticity, and given that the topic today is visual storytelling, and this visual-first world that we live in, that of course is a function of the fact that you want that authenticity, right? And sort of when you, like the example that you mentioned of that person in the restaurant sending that image. But tell me this, when it comes to going back to my next question on spending, I remember we had this conversation. You were on one of my panels, and we were speaking to a Gen Z influencer, and he was a little aghast at the fact that brand managers, when they come to him for campaigns, they tend to entirely ignore the Gen Z population with the explanation that they don't have the money to spend right now. Give me your thoughts on that, given that, we're talking about some remarkable figures here. Gen Z spending is projected to reach $2 trillion by 2035. Why are we sort of ignoring, this large swath of people who are willing to spend? And they'll work hard to get that money to spend it, which is the point that influencer was making, right? That even if the Gen Z doesn't have the money to spend right now, she or he will spend the next 2 weeks, doing freelance gigs or whatever it takes to get that product. So just give me your thoughts on why do we tend to dismiss them so easily, perhaps, but yet we talk about them as this, this remarkable generation that everybody wants a piece of.
The interesting numbers, when you look at stats in India, there are about 377 million Gen Zs. It's more than the population of the US. And when we embarked on this journey last year, we took a step back and said that what's really happening in this space? So we partnered with BCG, and we really went out in the market. We spent 4 months trying to understand 3 things. 1, their economic power. 2, their behavioral disposition, and 3, how it manifests itself into shopping behavior. Now, there were very interesting insights that came out of this study. One was to break the myth. Gen Z in India today has a direct spending power of $250 billion. That's roughly about 1/4 of India's overall consumption, retail consumption. And their indirect plus direct consumption power accounts for 43% of India's consumption, which is roughly about $850 billion. We see this day in and day out. I'm sure some of your parents sitting like me, and I can share an anecdote. My son, who's 15 years old, he is massively into gadgets, though he doesn't own one. But maybe that's the thing that stimulated him to know more about gadgets. But he is the single point of influence in the household who determines which smartphone his mom will buy and which TV is the household going to get. And I'm sure all of you may have experienced the kind of confident influencing capability that this generation comes with.
And research-led.
Very research-led. Like, they go into the nitty-gritties of, I heard this here, I consumed this content, therefore I can tell you these are the feature set capabilities of a smartphone A versus B versus C. And they're very, very informed and disposed towards a definitive proposition. So one of the things that we tried to map in that report is that uh, the next phase of retail consumption growth is going to be led by this generation. So in next 10 years, this generation will contribute to $2 trillion of retail consumption in India. So I think it's time for everyone to wake up to the fact that 1 out of 4 Gen Z is already in the workforce. In the next 10 years, this will be 3 out of 4. So every third Gen Zer will already be in India's workforce. And this is the time when their preferences, their behaviors, their attitudes are getting established. So I think we do believe India is a great place where a lot of retail consumption growth is going to be driven by this generation.
And just circling back again to the theme, which is visuals, how will that impact how marketers target this cohort going forward? Any thoughts on that?
Sure. I think one of the big things that has happened in India in the internet space is that 80% of all mobile internet traffic in India is actually video. So video breaks most language barriers. If you come to think of it, video content is the most consuming form of video consumption that drives internet behavior in India. And when you overlay it with what's happening today, come to think of how shopping is done. Firstly, a lot of marketeers must be sitting here. There is a pre-step to the classic funnel which is broken by the Gen Z. There is no funnel in the world of Gen Z. The classic funnel is actually broken. And I'm sure I'm talking about a cliched thing, but many of you know this. The whole discovery, inspiration, loyalty, purchase is now an intertwined thing. It's not a classic consumer funnel where I'll discover something, then I'll probably search about it, then I'll go and buy, and then I'll post it saying I bought it. I think there is an element of inspiration that comes before, especially true to this generation, when they decide to buy something. And that inspiration is happening, it could happen in any form of consumption, digital consumption media. Come to think of it, social platforms or other video platforms is where this generation, that's their entertainment center, that's where they connect with friends, that's where they get inspired, that's where they share what they bought. So it's not about talking to them in a very linear way. It's about reaching out to them in a way that captures their attention.
That inspiration, just on that point, Pulkit, when we talk about influencer marketing, tell me how much of their purchase decisions is actually influenced by influencers? What are you seeing on the platform, for instance?
One of the things, and I'll talk about this, all of you use multiple platforms, I'm sure. One of the things different with Snapchat, and I'll give you context to why I'm talking about this, is that our platform is unlike other social platforms. We pride ourselves in saying we are the antidote to social media, and there's a reason why we say that. On Snapchat, we've seen users interact with their very close friends, and it's all about visual messaging. So it's not about having 100 friends social graph. It's about the friend graph will look about 5 close friends or 6 close friends, and they are very intimate conversations. To the extent that shopping decisions today for this generation is being influenced by their close friends and influencers in an equal palatable way. So, as I said, I'm almost on the verge of being obsessive about, noticing how Gen Z behaves. You go to a shopping mall, and I'm sure you've heard about this, you've read about this, but you observe this next time. It's actually true. A youngster who's out there trying to wear clothes have their camera on, and they're probably clicking snaps in real time and trying to get an endorsement from a close friend about whether this looks good on them. And this has an extended form of visual immersion, where if you look at our AR capabilities, we are now trying to work with brands where we are saying that why do you want to deliver a singular product experience? Why don't you make it more experiential by giving it an AR touch? So We did something recently with Myntra where sneakers is a big business for them. We launched a lens where they integrated our catalog with Snap. And what you could do is take the Snap, open the Snap app, point your camera to the feet, and you could start scrolling and look at real time how the shoe looks on your feet. So I think one is the inspiration is getting more visually immersive. I think how the brands deliver their messaging is getting more immersive, visually immersive, and how shopping experiences lend themselves, whether it's offline or online, is getting more visually immersive.
Absolutely. And just let's stay on that track for a little longer, Pulkit. You mentioned, of course, the shopping behaviors. What are you looking at going forward on the platform in terms of providing more of those immersive experience for your users, as well as for brands looking to tap into this audience?
As I said, I think, look, shopping behavior is getting intertwined between online, offline, and to the dismal, I was completely amused by one of the findings in the study, which inherent myth that I always had was that Gen Z is predominantly an online shopping audience. Actually, it's untrue. They like to shop as much in stores as much as they want to shop online. And their in-store experiences are actually driven by real-time camera experiences, whether it's an influencer who they're trying to follow, or whether they're trying to get a real-time endorsement from friends and family on what they buy. Having said this, I think as Snap, we do believe that one of the things that has changed in the last few years with the emergence of the smartphone, how content is consumed in the smartphone, is the form of storytelling is kind of shrinking every single year. Because of the attention span of users. Especially to this generation, if you see them scroll, how they consume content, it's like attention is a very precious currency to brands and marketeers.
How do you get them to stop?
Exactly. And how do you get them to really hear about your brand messaging? And to that effect, I think, while video is an established form of consumption behavior, I think how do you get their attention in a very attention-crunched era is the real challenge. And I don't know the answer myself. Probably we'll discover it as we go. And around the world, TikTok is a great experience. Look at how short-form video is consumed. And now, even on our platforms, creators are consuming content that are bite-sized. Creators are creating content that are meant for Gen Z. And they are creating content in a way which is different from that which exists in a Facebook or an Instagram than how it should exist on Snap. So in many ways, a lot of things are changing in the context of how content gets consumed, how attention is a precious currency for brands and marketers to tap in, and how creators also realize this behavioral aspect and are trying to create content that engages this audience in meaningful ways.
So do you find, this can entirely be just your, a cursory view on what you say. Do you find that this generation, the one that we're speaking about, Gen Z, is just not tapping into any kind of long-form content? Or are we just focusing on the wrong thing when we constantly sort of refer to content in terms of length? Are they just not consuming long-form content? And I'll maybe ask Gen Zers in the audience, do you all consume long-form content? No hands raised? Okay, so they don't.
Well, I would tend to believe, I don't have any empirical data, but I would tend to believe that I don't think they are not consuming long-form content. The fact that the emergence of various platforms which are delivering short-form content has kind of inherently led to this user behavior that has built over these years, saying, I am used to now scrolling my phone and used to seeing a short-form video. Having said that, I think content in any form, whether short form or long form, needs to be compelling or engaging, I would tend to believe. And it's not about only creating short-form content to capture the attention of this audience. It's about creating the right kind of content that is more visually immersive, that tells your brand story in a very authentic way that this audience relates to. As I said, this audience is very real. They are very authentic in many ways in their interactions. Their self-expression is at the forefront of how they behave and react to things. And they do care about issues around them. It's not about they are completely inadvertent or absent about the issues, affecting them.
Right.
So when you see a mixture of this, I think it's not about long-form content will be dead or is not being consumed. It's about building the right kind of content in any form that gets delivered on mobile or smartphones these days that allows these users to engage meaningfully.
And I think the two key words here are inspiration and expression that perhaps also sum up some parts of what you said. But because we have only 5 minutes left, as I promised, I want to ask maybe, okay, the Gen Zers who raised their hands earlier, can you all raise your hand again, please, in the crowd? Yeah, maybe, do you want to maybe just, maybe not a question, but would you like to sort of, just comment on what you've heard today? No? All right, so you agree with most of everything that was said in terms of how Gen Zers shop and all of that? All right, so Pulkit, we are on the right track at least. But just your closing remarks, Pulkit, on 2025, what do you see happening in terms of marketers? What are they looking at? What are the key trends that we should be keeping an eye on when it comes to activity on platforms like yours?
Firstly, I'll lay context to, I think this is a great time to India, and I was telling you, this is a great time to be in India. When you come to it, our favorite comparison is China. You come to think of it, India is in form of per capita income where China was in 2004. So we are 20 years behind. But when you look at the digital adoption metrics, India is where China was in 2021. And that's a very compelling story to be in India at this point in time. All economic indicators suggest that as our per capita income increases, more disposable income comes in, which will drive more digital products and service consumption. The India digital ad market in 2025 and in the next 4 years is going to grow massively. So India is today the 7th largest digital ads market. In 4 years, we are slated to be the number 3 globally. And what is going to drive this consumption? I see the trends are not going to change. Internet is about 4 key things: video, social, payments, and commerce. And I think those 4 trends will continue to catalyze or fuel the India internet growth. And I think, I do believe for marketeers, when we did this survey, I'll just share a snapshot. 45% of our marketeers, we reached out to large brands, mid-sized brands, D2C brands in our BCG Snap report. 45% of the marketeers tend to agree that this audience, Gen Z audience, is an important one to tap in, but less than 15% are actually acting upon it. And when you map this to the fact that in next 10 years, the growth of retail consumption in India is going to be driven by Gen Z, I think it's high time that we start focusing more on this audience to drive brand experiences.
Absolutely, and that's a great note to end our conversation on, and a great message to all the marketers out there as well. Thank you so much. It was lovely chatting with you as always, Pulkit.
Likewise,
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to the audience. Thanks.
Thank you.